Welcome to the MS&Me Radio Network, a division of the Multiple Sclerosis Global Support Network. The following program broadcast is an original creation by the broadcast entity. Discussion within the following broadcast should be used for informational purposes only and is not a substitute for professional medical advice or consultation. Before considering application of any broadcast content in the following program, please consult your healthcare provider. If you feel you are having a medical emergency, please contact your local health services for immediate assistance. MS&Me Media and the Multiple Sclerosis Global Support Network do not guarantee or warrant the accuracy of information in the broadcast to follow. The Multiple Sclerosis Global Support Network provisions broadcast services to program hosts. Information discussed in the broadcast does not necessarily reflect the views, opinions, or goals of the network and are solely those of the show broadcast host. Should you wish to host a broadcast, please visit our website at msmemedia.com and submit a request to become a program host. We thank you for listening to the MS&Me Radio Network. Enjoy the show.
Hey y'all, welcome. You are listening to Straight Up with MS and all its crazy little circles on MS&Me Radio, supported by the MS Global Support Network. Gosh, that's a mouthful. I'm your host, Patty Long at MS and It for Life. This is my premiere episode, so I thought I would start off by just telling you a little bit about myself. I'm straight up, meaning honest with people, and I have been my whole life. So I absolutely had to put that in the title of the show. And I'm also well aware of many of the circles of MS. One of the first ones that I'll be talking about is how sleep, exhaustion, and exercise actually form a circle, and the only way to solve those three issues is to solve them all. And that's why and that's how it makes this circle. And then other circles jump in on it, like depression comes with exhaustion. So that intertwines a lot of stuff with this sleep, exhaustion, exercise routine, and that circle, because exhaustion comes in with so many other issues. And there's so many different types of exhaustion. There's mental exhaustion, there's physical exhaustion, and there's the exhaustion from just not being able to recharge your body. There's exhaustion from not sleeping well and having made those good sleep patterns. So that'll be for another show, because today we're going to try and learn a little bit about me. Or at least I've been told by the great folks who invited me to do this show, Erica at MS&Me Radio, who actually started the whole MS Global Support Network. She was their founder. And Cynthia at MS Unites both sent me direct messages on Twitter, and asked if I'd like to do a show, and I tell you, I was thrilled and honored to have been asked. And I apologize to all of you folks for it taking me so long, and I do mean so long, to get my act together to start the show. I'm sitting outside on my back deck, and most of the time I can be found either on the deck or on the porch. Just depends on the weather, and right now we have a pretty good breeze going on. And if I was on the front porch, it'd be like being in a wind tunnel. So I'm not on the front porch. Most people with MS talk about heat intolerances. And I'm a weird duck, you know. I always have been. I've always been different. And that was my dog Hotch you just heard. But I've always Yes, Hachi, I know. I've always been different. And I always knew I was kind of different. I grew up to um, be able to think for myself and be an independent thinker and not just follow the flow or believe everything I was told just because this other person was an adult and I was a kid, or just because this other person was a doctor and I'm not. I mean, it all comes down to my involvement and learning about the things that I've needed to learn over the years. Um, it has not always been a good thing. I got in a lot of trouble when I was in the 7th grade because I had an English teacher. Back then, we took English. We did not take language arts. And English was approached in the same way foreign languages are, and we had to learn all the various parts of speech. So when I go in to class that day in 7th grade, and my English teacher tells the class that there are 5 parts of speech, I said, no, they're not. There's more than that. And I argued with her and argued with her. Got sent to the principal's office for insubordination. Principal, I don't know, maybe he didn't know how many parts of speech there are, or maybe he just didn't care. But it was insubordination, so I got in a lot of trouble. And back then, when you got in trouble at school, you got in trouble at home. So, being an independent thinker like I am, and standing up for what I think is right and what I know to be right or what I know to be the truth is sort of how I've lived my whole life. And my grandfather was also really, really, really huge in my life. I loved that man. Oh, man. I still talk to him, and he passed away, gosh, 97, I think. So he's really on my mind right now. We had his funeral in Florida where he had lived from the time he retired, basically, until he moved in with my mom and dad a few years before he passed. But I'd go to his house every summer, or nearly every summer. And when I was 5, and I remember this, I so remember this, and here comes this stubborn, independent thing, but he was going to take me to the pool to go swimming. And they had this big, huge clubhouse where everybody would hang out and play cards and have dinner and just chit-chat. And they had a nice pool for, a neighborhood pool. It was actually bigger in my mind. Maybe it wasn't really, but it was bigger than what I see being built in neighborhoods today. But I was 5, so, your perception of size as you get older changes. So, that big pool might have only been the same size as the ones out there today in neighborhoods. I have no clue. And my grandfather said, go get ready, we'll go swimming. Make sure you grab a towel and get your shoes. Now, he didn't tell me to put my shoes on. So when I met him in the garage, my shoes were in my hand and not on my feet. And he looked at me kind of funny and cocked his head a little bit, and he says, you realize you have to walk on the sidewalk for no reason. And he starts shaking that big finger of his at me, and he says, for no reason are you allowed to step off the sidewalk. I don't care how hot your feet get, you don't step off the sidewalk. If you want to put your shoes on because they're hot, that was fine. But do not step off the sidewalk. Do not even step off the sidewalk into yards that are painted green, cemented over, and painted green. Stay on the sidewalk. So I'm like, okay. And so we start walking. And sure, the sidewalk was hot. We're in Florida. It's summertime, you know. It's cement. It's hot. But I'm little, and I'm stubborn. And I don't want to wear my shoes. So I didn't. And as we were walking I don't know how many blocks. It was, like one block down and then maybe 3 or 4 up and to get there. And as we were walking along and we would see somebody, we would stop and say hello. And we would smile at them. And I was really very good as a kid. I didn't interrupt conversations. I do that more now than I did then. But I didn't interrupt people. I listened. I smiled, which I do that now too. But I listened really well. I smiled. And I picked up on things. So we stopped and we'd talk to people and say hey. And I'd hold my shoes as my feet were getting hotter and hotter. And I was kind of stepping up and down and up and down and up and down because, then my feet weren't plastered to the pavement. And we would move on. And my grandfather would just look at me and kind of grin and chuckle a little bit. And that just made me smile and stick to my guns and be just so stubborn about putting my shoes on. And we walked a little further and we'd meet another person and we'd stop and I'd be picking those feet up again, kind of dancing and being very polite about it and trying not to be swaying here and there and, or anything like that. But picking my feet up and down a little bit so that they didn't get any hotter. And then we'd move on. So we stopped like this 2 or 3 times on the way to the pool that day. And on the last stop, we stopped at my Uncle Lou and Aunt Mary's, right in front of their house. Now, Uncle Lou was out in his yard. And he actually was starting to invite us to come to his house, which would have gotten me off of that cement, and my grandfather wasn't going to do that. If I was going to be stubborn, he was too. So he called Uncle Lou over to me. Now, Uncle Lou wasn't like blood relation uncle, but I have known him my whole life, or I knew him my whole life. He actually passed away while I was still living in Dunwoody, Georgia. It was a great place to grow up, and I love going back. But I was in high school, so I was probably 16, maybe 15 when he passed away. And I'm 53 now. I can't believe it, but I am. I mean, that's what they tell me. They say if you do the math, which I haven't, I don't, and I'm not going to, then you will find out that I am 53 years old. I think it's more like maybe 35 or 25 or some days even 3. So I don't know that I put much stock in my chronological age or other people's math. But in any case, back to my grandfather. So he calls my Uncle Lou over to us, and they stood there and they talked. And this is one of my grandfather's very best friends in the whole wide world. And he was the Kellogg's man. And it was really cool because there was a bunch of friends who lived in Pennsylvania and knew each other there, and were all close to the same age. And when they retired, they all moved to the exact same neighborhood. Uncle Lou was one of those people. So he came and talked to us and brought me a box of cereal because he's the Kellogg's man, and he's always got little mini boxes of new cereals. And I think that summer, because he was retired, he'd actually just stocked his house with them for me, because it had already become a habit when they were living in Pennsylvania that when you visit Uncle Lou and Aunt Mary, you get a box of cereal to take home from the Kellogg's company. So anyways, they talked for a little while, and I did my little dancey thing, and then we were almost to the pool, and the pool was in sight. I could see it, the fencing around the whole area, because it was a big area, and there was, tables and chairs with umbrellas, and there was, the lounge chairs for laying out on, and there was a shuffleboard set up for anybody who wanted to play shuffleboard. And my grandfather was really, really awesome at shuffleboard, and he taught me how to play, and I enjoyed doing that when we went to the pool too, because you couldn't go home until you were dry. So after swimming, we would play shuffleboard. But he stops me when we got to that fence and that pool was in sight, to get my feet out of the heat. And he looks at me, and he's got this grin on his face, and he bends over a little bit, and he points that big index finger at me, and he says, "Patty, what are you here for?" And I just kind of looked at him. What are you here for? What am I here for? I had to think about it, and when I started thinking about it, my feet quit moving quite as much, and then as they got really hot, the answer popped into my head, and I said, "I'm here to go swimming and to have fun and to love you and Grandma and all the other people in my life, and I'm here to laugh a whole bunch and smile all the time and just enjoy myself." And he got the biggest grin on his face, and he pointed that index finger at me again, and he shook it a couple of times, and he says, "You got that right." And I just smiled and grinned, and we went on to the pool, and I had a blast. I was a water baby, always have been. So I had a really great time at the pool, and then, as I said, when it was time to dry off, we'd go play shuffleboard. And at 5 years old and trying to learn how to play shuffleboard and everything being so oversized, I was extremely crappy at it. And so I'd try and hit the target, and it'd go all over the place, and my grandfather would laugh, and I would laugh, and then we'd try again, and I got better and better over the years. And of course, everything wasn't quite as oversized over the years as they went by. I grew, and all of this stuff around me didn't. So it's kind of amusing as you look back at your life about how perception comes into play. I mean, even with money, someone who is middle class and making ends meet but doesn't have much money left over does not consider themselves well off. And somebody who is got more money than they know what to do with has no idea what poverty is, because they just can't imagine it. And even a lot of the middle class people cannot imagine what poverty is because they've never experienced it. I had a lady actually say, well, why would you have to choose whether or not to eat when you're feeding your kids? Duh, because there's not enough to go around. So you make the choice. I'm going to feed my kids first, and then what they don't eat, I will eat. And if there's still not enough, then guess who goes without? It would be me, not my children. Come on, people. And then there's people that are even poorer than that, that are homeless. So poverty and wealth is all relative to what you know. And everything becomes very much relative to what you know, which plays a big part in MS and the ignorance that goes with what we deal with. It's because people who have never experienced any of these things are clueless. They truly are. They cannot comprehend anything beyond their experiences. So, and that plays a big part in the isolation of people with MS. And that isolation is a part of that big circle of depression and anger and anxiety, which so is the ignorance. I mean, I can get so angry over ignorance. But my grandfather asked me that same question over and over again throughout the years. And while my answer would change somewhat, because as I got older, I started going to school and needing to do my homework. So that came into it, and then chores came into it, and more and more of those things that are responsibilities came into play. But the basics were still the same. I am here to love people, to laugh a lot, and I do mean a lot, because that's key to everything, is that laughter and smiling at people just cause, whether you know them or not. If you smile at them, chances are they're going to smile at you, or they're going to make some weirdo expression and you're going to laugh like crazy. Either way, it's a good thing. And the more you smile, the better you feel, which helps that big depression circle. So smiling is important, and loving people is important, and not losing your heart to the anger, or to the disease itself. I mean, I have so many people that have told me, I hate MS. And I say, quit hating MS. MS is a part of who you are. And if you are hating MS, you are hating yourself. And do not hate yourself. And I am so adamant about this and feel so strongly about this. I get very aggravated to hear people tell me they hate themselves. And whether you like it or not, if you've been diagnosed with MS, MS becomes a part of you. So think about what you are actually here for. I've kind of given you my take on that, but think about it and share your take on it with me if you'd like to, because I think it's important. And I also think that while keeping heart is super, super important, I also think that the MS community seems to put too much emphasis on the fact that we are all different. Oh my gosh, we all have the same disease. Whether you call it one thing or another, it's all the same disease. It's all your central nervous system. It's all about it falling apart and creating wonkiness that comes out in one form or another. And to me, one of the reasons why we are all, quote, different is just because we are plainly different people. We grew up different with different experiences. And not only did we have different experiences, but we also, as babies, when we were first born and first developing the pathways for our central nervous system to go throughout our body, we did that differently. We didn't all start learning, and that was my chime that it's about time to stop here. But,
12:30.
see there? And there it goes again, and my phone telling me what time it is so I can keep track. But, you know, from birth, our central nervous system's connected to the rest of us in different ways. You know, we couldn't really focus and see. We couldn't smile. We couldn't walk. We couldn't talk. We couldn't do anything but lay in our cribs and and pee in our diapers. And that was pretty much it. So we developed and learned these different things at different rates. And when you do that, you know, it creates these differences in our pathways. And so I think that's a good part of why we are different. But like I said, my MS team is everybody out there. And I'd love to hear from you. But my time seems to be about up. And before it is, again, I would like to thank Erica Lyons Richardson, who is the founder of this great network, and Cynthia at MS Unites for inviting me to do this show for you. I hope you have enjoyed hearing a little bit about me. And next week we'll be moving on to one of the many circles within MS. And thanks everyone for listening. If you'd like, you can find me on Twitter at MS&It for Life. That's MSENIT, the number 4, LIFE. And I'd love to hear from you. Stay positive, love yourself, and let's celebrate how alike we are instead of how different we are. Thank you so much again for listening. I'm Patty Long. Have a wonderful day and smile and laugh as often as possible. Thank you.